City Council on Monday, January 31st. It is 6:02, and I call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, can we have roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem James.
Here.
Councilmember Lee Smay.
Here.
Councilmember Mikulski.
Here.
Councilmember Polika.
Here.
And Mayor Piana.
Here. Next up on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second. Moved by Polika, seconded by
James.
Councilwoman James. Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem James.
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee Smay.
Yes.
Councilmember Polika.
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. And on our presentation agenda tonight is the annual presentation of the audited financial statements for the City of Ferndale for fiscal year ending 2030, June 30th, 2021. And I believe introducing this is our city manager.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, sorry, it was not on here. We're going to back up before we go to the presentation. We forgot the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, back to the presentation. And introducing this is our city manager.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Yes, tonight, this will be the 2021 audit presented by our auditor. Typically, we would present this at the year end in December. This year's, we've had significant staffing changes in the finance department, and we are thus presenting it this evening. So we wanted to give it its own council meeting, so council agreed to attend a special session so we could just have an hour to hear the presentation as we would any other year. And with that, I would like to also introduce our new finance director, Phil Whitfield. He is here then. This is his first time attending in person in council.
Welcome.
Aaron, go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, thank you. Our thanks to Phil and Michelle and the rest of the administration and staff for their courtesy, cooperation, and assistance. This is definitely a collaborative effort. These remote audits we're getting used to them now, but 2 years in, we're we're getting through the bumps and the bruises. A lot of transition here, but we appreciate all the assistance that we received throughout the field work and beyond. The audit report has been uploaded to Treasury's website as well as the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. So we've met the deadline there for the extension. What I plan to do tonight is highlight what I think are the key areas, as I've done in the past. If you've got questions, feel free to stop me at any time and we can go through those. Okay, just have to. Well, having some technical difficulty here. See the mouse. Apologize here. No, I don't see it all. Able to share the screen, but not. Yeah. Yeah, I can't see the mouse. Sorry.
5-minute recess, so you might have to re-upload it.
Is it froze? Okay, there we go.
How fast does it take to?
That's what I was thinking.
I see the mouse. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I always like to start out with the purpose or the objective of an audit, and that is to express opinions on the financial statements as to whether they're fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with GAAP or generally accepted accounting principles. The purpose of an audit is not to detect fraud or give you an opinion on your internal controls, and that is because fraud detection deterrence and prevention, as well as sound internal controls, are management responsibilities. Now, if we find fraud, we certainly have a responsibility to communicate that to you. If we've got recommendations on how to improve your internal controls, we would let you know about that as well. We would do so in writing in a report on internal control. But that's a byproduct of the audit itself. The purpose of the audit is to express opinions on the financial statements. The independent auditor's report is on our letterhead. It's on pages 1 through 3 of your bound report on financial statements. And I've included a few paragraphs in this slideshow from that letter. So this is the second paragraph on page 1. The paragraph is titled Management's Responsibility for the Financial Statements. And not only is management responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements, they're also responsible for the internal controls over that preparation and fair presentation. Our responsibility, as I've stated, this is the third paragraph on page 1. This is our responsibility is to express opinions on the financial statements based on our audit. Now, the City of Ferndale's audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, and the uniform guidance. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means in a minute. The opinions are expressed in the first paragraph on page 2, and we've expressed what we refer to as unmodified opinions on the financial statements, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide for a set of financial statements. To put that into some perspective, there are 3 types of opinions. You have unmodified opinions, but we could have expressed a qualified opinion, and that might read something like, except for capital assets, the financial statements are fairly presented. We could have expressed an adverse opinion where the financial statements do not present fairly the financial position of the city. The only other alternative that we have would be to disclaim an opinion altogether. We just couldn't audit your records. So obviously, of the options, you have the highest level of assurance that we can provide. That's what you want to see as a council. And that is an opinion on the fair presentation of the financial statements. It's not opinion on your financial health. And I think that's an important distinction to make as we go through this. There are 2 types of financial statements included in your report. The first being government-wide financial statements, and then the other perspective would be the fund-level financial statements. Government-wide financial statements are prepared on the full accrual basis of accounting, and they primarily have a long-term perspective, and they're prepared once a year. The only time you see the government-wide financial statements is in your audit report. And it is a requirement of generally accepted accounting principles to have government-wide financial statements. Now, I did not duplicate the financial statements in this presentation, but I did highlight a few things. You've got the reports in front of you. The page numbers that are referred to when I go through the presentation are the page numbers from the reports. This is slide number 7 here, and I highlight a few things about the statement of net position. And this is page 11 of the report on the financial statements. The statement of net position is a snapshot as of June 30th, 2021, of your assets, deferred outflows, liabilities, deferred inflows, and the resulting net position or equity. In your government-wide financial statements are broken down into types. You have governmental activities, business type activities, and component units. The current ratio I've highlighted here is a measure of liquidity, and is calculated by dividing current assets by current liabilities. And that tells you how capable the city is in meeting their current obligations as they come due. Can you pay the bills? And as of June 30th, 2021, your governmental activities had a current ratio of 3.4, so you could cover your obligations 3 times over. It was 3.3 at June 30, 2020. Your business type activities, 1.3. It was 2.2 at June 30, 2020. The other metric that I have on the slide here is the unrestricted net position compared to expenses, and that tells you how long you get operate before you, yes?
Would you like council to ask questions along the way or wait till the end?
Whatever your preference. You got a question, I can have it answered.
I think we might have a question.
Okay.
I do. Through the chair, for the record, and for a lot of people listening that aren't aware, can you explain the difference between government activities and business type activities?
So your business type activities would be your water and sewer and your auto parking. And then your governmental activities would be it would be all the other functions, your governmental functions, your parks and rec, your capital projects, your debt service, all lumped into one. So we're going to talk about the difference between modified accrual and full accrual. Governmental activities are all of those activities rolled into one column, prepared on the full accrual basis of accounting, which is different than your governmental fund financial statements. So That's in a nutshell, that's the difference between the two types of activities.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm looking at the unrestricted net position compared to expenses, and that tells you how long you could operate before you needed to generate any additional revenue. And in this case, on the full accrual basis of accounting, at June 30th, 2021, both your governmental activities and business type activities had negative unrestricted net position. We will, as I mentioned, the good timing on the question actually, the proprietary funds or enterprise funds consist of your water and sewer fund and your auto parking fund, and collectively those are the same as your business type activities, and it's the same basis of accounting too when we get to that. So I'll look into the unrestricted net position compared to expenses in more detail in a couple of slides here. The statement of activities is also a government-wide financial statement. It is presented on page 12 of the report. Also a full accrual financial statement. A little backwards because it reads left to right and then top to bottom, and we start with expenses. So that kind of takes what we're used to and turns it all around, because we're used to revenues less expenses equals the net result or net income. So for this statement, the third number from the bottom is the one that I like to look at, and that is the change in net position. And for governmental activities, your net position improved by $2.9 million. And the business type activities actually decreased by $509,000. As I said, governmental fund financial statements are prepared on the modified accrual basis of accounting. These are presented on pages 13 and 15. They have a current financial resources focus. So what that means is when we look at the governmental fund balance sheet, what you won't see are those long-term items like capital assets, long-term debt, net pension liability, net OPEB liability, net pension asset in your case. Those aren't accounted for under the modified accrual basis of accounting. The fund level financial statement should be a more familiar presentation for you. It is the level at which your budgets are prepared. It's the level of reporting that you get throughout the year. It is all done at the fund level. The governmental funds balance sheet is presented on page 13, also a snapshot as of June 30th, the point in time. And in this case, I tend to focus on the general fund as the operating fund for the city. And we look at fund balance. That's the equity as of June 30th. And that total fund balance was $6.9 million. That $6.9 million is broken down into 5 classifications or categories at various levels of constraint. So we start with the most constraining categories being non-spendable, then restricted, then committed. When we get to assign, you can assign and unassign fund balance as you see fit. It's really just management's intentions for the future use of fund balance. So it's available for you to spend. When I look at the assigned and unassigned portions of fund balance, I refer to them collectively as unrestricted, because you can really spend it however you choose. I compare that unrestricted fund balance to your expenditures, and in this case transfers out to other funds or other financing uses. Your total unrestricted fund balance is $5.7 million. In the lower right-hand corner there, the $9,700 plus the $5.7 million. Compared to your expenditures and transfers out of $23,230,551. So that unrestricted fund balance represents approximately 25% of your annual expenditures. The city has a policy to maintain unassigned fund balance of 12%, and you're at 25% for unrestricted. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends that you maintain a minimum fund balance in your general fund that is equal to 2 months of normal operations. So 2 out of 12 months is about 17%, and you are at 25%. The statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance is presented on page 15. Again, with the emphasis on the general fund here. Total revenues of approximately $23 million for the year. That was an increase of about $3 million, $2,957,000, or 14%. A lot of that was due to the CARES Act, COVID-19 related money, grant funding. Total expenditures for the year, about $22 million. That was a decrease of $557,000, which was about a 2% decrease. Your net other financing sources and uses was a net use of $1,169,000, which resulted in no change in fund balance. And that's something you've done for the last 4 years at least. Show you the graph on that. You've used transfers in and out to balance your revenues and expenditures so that there isn't a change in fund balance. And you've done that the last 4 years. So this is a bar graph that shows you the last 5 years of activity for the general fund. And you'll note that revenues exceeded expenditures in 2017, but they equaled for the other 4 years. This is a pie chart that details the composition of your general fund revenue. Largest source of revenues, of course, property taxes at 51%. It's 49% for 2020. Intergovernmental at 26%, and that would include any federal, state, or local intergovernmental revenue. 26%. That was 17% in 2020. So again, you see the impact of the CARES Act money. The composition of your general fund expenditures. Largest use of funds, public safety at 49%. It's 52% in 2020. General government at 25%. It was 22% in 2020. And public works at 12%, which was 15% in 2020. So a little bit of a shift, but small increments really in the composition of your expenditures. This is a line graph, excuse me, of your unrestricted fund balance as a percentage of expenditures between 25 and 30% over the last 5 years. So as I said, you maintained no change in fund balance for the last 4 years. So what that tells you is that your expenditures increased over the last 4 years. As I said, the city's policy is to maintain a minimum fund balance, unassigned fund balance of 12%. You far exceeded that. This graph shows you the same information, but in terms of dollars instead of percentages. The blue line represents the actual unrestricted fund balance. The brownish orange line is 17% of each year. All right, so proprietary funds, again, are prepared on the, using the full accrual basis of accounting, just like the government-wide financial statements. And in fact, those two funds are the same as your business type activities, same information, more detail at the fund level, a slightly different format. So again, I did not duplicate the financial statements. I think they get a little hard to read if I try to put them into a PowerPoint presentation. But the proprietary funds statement of net position is presented on page 17. Start with the water and sewer fund. Once again, a snapshot as of June 30th, 2021. Total net position in the water and sewer fund was $25,739,000. But that was broken down into 3 categories. You got the amount that's invested in capital assets, which was $21,908,000. You've got an amount restricted for pension benefits of $2.2 million, and that is because you have a net pension asset recorded in this fund. So you can't spend that net position on anything but pensions. So we have to restrict that. Your unrestricted net position, $1,609,000. That's what you have available for future use. When you compare that with your operating expenses of $10.3 million, and that $10.3 million, I've backed out depreciation expense, so really it's $7.8 million. And as of June 30th, 2021, that unrestricted net position represents 21% of those operating expenses less depreciation. I subtract depreciation out because it's a non-cash expense. A visual perspective of the last 5 years for your water and sewer fund, revenues, expenses, and total net position. If you looked at this graph, you'd think, well, yeah, we're healthy. You look at all that equity we have. But again, you can't spend all of it. So I took that net position and I broke it down into the 3 categories. And as you can see, even though your total net position increased 2020 to 2021, your unrestricted net position actually decreased. But what that shows you is that you made a significant investment in your capital, your systems, your water and sewer systems. You went from $19.5 million in 2020 to about $22 million in 2021. That was your increase in the net investment in capital assets. Your unrestricted portion went from $4.2 million down to $1.6. And that's probably more evident on this graph. This is the unrestricted net position compared to your operating expenses for the past 5 years. And because it's an enterprise fund and prepared on a full accrual basis of accounting, we can't measure financial health in the same way as we would for the general fund. I can't tell you 17% is what you should have. Because everybody's different. It really depends on the condition of your systems. So that unrestricted net position, really you should have 3 components that make up that unrestricted net position balance. We recommend 2 to 3 months of operations, plus the annual debt service requirements, plus your capital needs. And the capital needs piece is really the most subjective part of it all. But I have this graph here. This is just using round numbers and estimates here. 3 months worth of operations would require $2.6 million, or about $2.6 million of net position. Next year's principal and interest, which means the year you're in now, is about $2.5 million. And then again, the most subjective piece is your capital needs. And what I did is I looked back at the last 5 or 6 years and took an average of sorts. Again, I rounded it, so it's 1.4 million. So I'm suggesting you really want an unrestricted net position balance of about $6.5 million. And you're at 1.6 million. When we get to the auto parking fund, again, a snapshot when we're looking at the statement of net position. In this case, total net position was negative by about $2.5 million. So obviously that's too low. The percentage really doesn't mean a whole lot in this case because it's negative. Needs to be higher than negative 2.5 million. But for a visual perspective, you can see here, 2021 was not kind to this fund. 2020 wasn't all that kind either. Your expenses exceeded revenues in both of those years. Your total net position has dropped. And then when you look at the components between the net investment and capital assets and the unrestricted, you can see this. Again, you made significant capital investments in that fund. You went from 2 million to about 4.8 million, 4.9 million. Your unrestricted net position went from a positive 1 million to a negative 2.5, just from 2020 to 2021. And again, probably the more telling graph, there's the percentage of net position compared to operating expenses. So for this fund, 3 months worth of operations would be about $300,000. Your principal and interest on debt for the coming year or this year that you're in now is 1.1 million. And then again, a subjective capital outlay, $1 million. That might be high considering all the investments you've already made. But again, just for an example, 2.4 million is what I would recommend, and you're at a negative 2.5. Now, the city, well, maybe I'll stop right there on the financial statement part. Any questions on what I've said so far?
Look, do we have any good news?
We do. We're actually getting a good audit report. That is the good news. Our audit is good.
Okay.
But I think what we're seeing in enterprise funds is typical for all cities. Water usage is down, I think, in general. And I think what we haven't explained yet is that the city council approved $800,000 to help with lead line replacements, which is why there's a decrease in the water and sewer fund. So it wasn't from mismanagement or anything else. It was on actually helping accelerate the transition of the lead lines. So, but I think we need to pull back a little bit on that, and I think we all agree that we need to, and work with the city manager and our staff on identifying some more, redefining what the targets could be, because we had a really aggressive approach, which was done with compassion and good intent, right?
I'm not arguing that at all.
And then the parking, I'm seeing that parking revenue is down everywhere in cities that have parking systems, so I don't think we're any different than what other cities are experiencing. We're just managing it and dealing with it with our own specific parking assets. So that's my take on it, but we do have some decisions to make
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, through the chair, the auditors gave us an initial preview of the results, and so Phil and I drafted a memo, and we shared that with council. And we do have corrective actions and recommendations for adjustments to be made immediately moving forward. And we can speak to those, but I don't want to interrupt Aaron. So I will say for everything that Aaron's about to present, we've shared a memo of some corrective actions and recommendations.
Okay, well then I'll be brief on the rest of this, so I'll go through it pretty quickly. But because the city expended more than $750,000 of federal awards, you're required to have a single audit or an audit performed in accordance with uniform guidance. So historically, you've had your financial statement audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. You've historically had an audit performed in accordance with government auditing standards, which is required by your funding sources. So the state of Michigan, when you borrow, when you borrow USDA money, you're required to have a yellow book audit or audit in accordance with government auditing standards until those debts or those bonds are paid off. But the $750,000 threshold you don't have every year. You've had a few of them over the years, but this year you did exceed your $750,000. You expended a total of $1,888,023. That was in the form of 2 federal programs, the biggest one of which was the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which you received not only through the State Department of Treasury, but also through Oakland County. So that made our selection process fairly easy. You expended $1,515,000 of your $1,888,000 under one federal program. So that's the program we picked to test. As a result of needing the audit in accordance with government auditing standards, we do have this independent report on internal control. And we did have a few findings and recommendations. They are included in this separate report, supplementary report, on pages 6 and 7. And then after pages 6 and 7, no, it's not 6 and 7, I'm sorry. The page 8 is the important page, and that is the schedule of findings and question costs, and this really summarizes the entire audit process. We did have some findings, so there's a material weakness, significant deficiencies, and non-compliance that was noted for the financial statement audit. For the single audit, the audit of the federal awards, there were no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and we expressed an unmodified opinion on the compliance with the major federal program requirements. You could not qualify as a low-risk auditee. In order to qualify as a low-risk auditee, you have to have 2 years' worth of single audits without any findings, without any material weaknesses, before you can be considered a low-risk auditee. So you'd have to have 3 in a row before you could even qualify for that. Each of these findings are presented on pages 9 and 10, and then following pages 9 and 10, 11 through 16 are management's corrective actions. So yes, there's quite the narrative there for how each of these findings is going to be addressed. We did discuss these a couple weeks ago, went through them in pretty good detail. I would say that 3 of these 4 you can directly attribute to the significant turnover in finance positions. So you have those there. You have management's response to each of the findings. I wasn't really going to go into any further detail unless you had specific questions on any of those issues. All right, then I guess I'll just follow up with on page 62 under note 17 of the financial statement report, so the bigger report, we have upcoming accounting pronouncements. There are 2 accounting pronouncements that may have an impact here at the city of Ferndale. GASB 87 is on leases. That is effective for your fiscal year that ends June 30 of 2022, so that's this year. GASB 96 is entitled Subscription-Based IT Arrangements, which is essentially the leasing of software. And that is effective for your fiscal year that ends June 30 of 2023. So my recommendation on implementation for these new accounting standards is to start making a list of all your leases. whether they're called leases or arrangements or contracts. If it's a lease, it's a lease, and the accounting for it is going to change for an operating lease anyway. So currently, we've got operating leases and capital leases. Capital leases end up on the statement of position as a long-term liability, but currently operating leases do not. You just expense them as you go.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
The operating lease, is that like software as a service that we're paying for? Okay.
That would be GASB 96, so you've got another year on that, but for like a copier or a police car or what have you, if you're leasing any of those items, you would just expense them as you go. And what this accounting standard is going to do is it's going to put it on that statement of net position for the full accrual statements as a long-term liability. You will also recognize an offsetting intangible asset for the right to use that copier or the right to use that police car. So it's going to make some changes to the way those are reported. And again, I would start gathering the information as soon as you can so we can get that implemented. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any further questions you may have, if there are any.
How does the corrective actions that the city manager and our finance director have already taken and underway to these correctives, how does that get listed in the next audit or recognized?
So in next year's, if you have a single audit again next year, then we will have, as we do this year, the schedule of prior year audit findings. And so they'll be listed again and what corrective action was taken and then whether or not that issue still exists.
Okay.
Now, this filing of the audit with the Department of Treasury very well may trigger a letter from Treasury to say, how are you going to respond? Well, you've already got your responses in there, but it's an automated process, so it's going to shoot the letter out, and you can just copy these responses and send them there.
Through the chair, Aaron, we haven't typically had over $750,000 in federal grants. So for most communities who received ARPA funds over $750,000, will they mostly all be having single audits, I assume?
They will. You can, depending on your level of funding, you can strategically spend that money so that you don't spend $750,000 in one fiscal year.
It's the spending of it, okay.
Yes, it's expenditures, it's not revenue.
Gotcha.
So in fact, you don't even recognize the revenue until you spend it.
Okay.
But we are seeing a lot more single audits, just in general, because of all of this federal money.
Sure.
And can you talk a little bit about, we still got the unqualified statement, which is the gold standard for an audit and financial management. Can you talk a little bit about these corrective actions in terms of internal controls and how that relates to the gold standard audit?
Well, so as I said, the opinion is on whether the financial statements are fairly presented.
Okay.
It's not an opinion of financial health.
Okay.
And it's not an opinion on your internal controls. Yeah, we don't express opinions on internal controls because we don't do nearly enough work to do that. We could. It costs you a fortune. We'd be here a long time. It takes you a whole year to generate the records. It takes us a long time to audit every single one of them to be able to give you that opinion on your internal control.
Okay. I have confidence in our new finance director as well as the finance team and our city manager. We had a really bumpy year last year with changeover in staff, not only in the finance department, but just in general for the whole city. And again, we're not we're in line with what's happening in other cities as well with transition of staff. And it's unfortunate that this happened at a time of, what was the fourth quarter of last year. So in the closeout of our fiscal year.
It makes the audit process pretty difficult.
Yeah, our new director had a lot to take over in a very short period of time. So I applaud your ability to get us over the finish line. Have you even been here for 3 months yet? Yeah, 90 days to complete an audit under your first job here. I mean, that's a significant accomplishment, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, through the chair, I'd take a moment to recognize Michelle Masti as well. Really, our financial leadership completely changed last year, and it started transitioning in the third quarter, and it just kept transitioning through the fourth quarter. So we really had an absence of leadership for half of the year last year into this year. And so Michelle Masti brought extreme amount of experience and knowledge and initiative in taking the audit before Phil was even on board. So I want to recognize that she was acting as a leader within the department while also managing the audit independently, while starting with the city and also trying to get familiar with all of the operations and history and institutional knowledge. So
Thank you, Michelle.
I can't give Michelle enough credit. Yeah.
The city manager, just for everybody watching, the city manager and our finance director have provided complete detailed approaches for council on how they're doing the corrective actions for internal controls. So I feel confident that we will get back on track to where we were and exceed expectations. And this is why you do audits.
I thought it was because the state requires you to, but whatever.
Well, the state requires it, but I think everybody on council and the city manager are all financial stability and transparency and correct financials is what we all need in order to make great decisions on behalf of the city. So.
If I may, through the chair, you mentioned that we do this particular audit is not the one that we do every year. Is that correct? This one?
You don't typically have a single audit. So you don't typically expend $750,000 of federal awards.
Don't do this.
Right, yeah.
We don't do that one.
Yeah, we always do this one.
We always do
Yes.
that one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I'm expecting with more ARPA funds and any future federal awards coming down, because there's a lot of money coming down the pipeline, that we could expect to do this again.
We will no doubt be applying for those grants, so
Yeah.
for sure.
We probably, not probably, we, our firm performs more than 100 single audits every year. And that number is going up.
And have you completed your presentation? Did I?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
Yep, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Are there any questions or comments from council about the specifics of the audit? Any funds or anything? This isn't a time to budget or talk about our budgeting process, but that's coming up in March. So fun times ahead. And I think what we need to do is keep in mind as some of the outcomes here of the audit as we go into the budgeting process. Particularly, I know we're going to have hard conversations with our enterprise funds coming up.
Yep.
Through the chair, yeah, next steps, we expect to present council with a budget amendment on the February 14th council meeting, and we will jump right into, as the mayor said, the budget process in March, and be discussing proposed budgets and fee schedule as well in March.
Can you talk a little bit about that? We're going to see quarterly budget amendments now, right, rather than 6 months?
Part of our corrective actions, yeah, both Phil and I would prefer more than a mid-year budget adjustment. We'd like to be monitoring and adjusting our variances quarterly.
Okay.
And so we have already scheduled the next one, which will be May 9th, during the May 9th City Council meeting. And there's no action the council needs to take for this.
Other than just acceptance of it, or?
It was to receive the 2021?
Yep.
Both audits.
Through the chair, I would add that the Parks and Recreation Department did add a consent agenda item to the agenda that just, the state required a resolution affirming that council adopted the 21 Parks and Rec plan before February 1st. So happy timing, we had a special meeting tonight.
Okay,
Nothing has changed.
from our 24th meeting?
Correct. This
Okay.
is just a resolution that reaffirms it.
Okay.
Do we need a motion to receive and file the audit? All right,
Both audits.
then I move that we receive and file 2 final audited financial statements following the conclusion of the 2021 City of Ferndale audit as submitted by the finance director.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem James and supported by Councilwoman Mikulski. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem James?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here and walking us through that. And thank you too so much to the city manager and our finance director for bringing solutions and corrective actions so we may move forward appropriately and accordingly.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right, we only have one consent agenda item tonight, and it is the consideration of a resolution reaffirming the adoption of the 2022/27 Parks Recreation Master Plan and authorization for the city clerk to sign the resolution. This was on our January 24th City Council meeting where we discussed and approved the Parks and Rec Master Plan for grant reporting and acceptance of grant funds notice. The Parks and Rec plan is still sort of being worked on with community engagement, so there most likely will be amendments towards May or June to the Parks and Rec plan. But until then, we need to pass this resolution. Significant work has been done on the Parks and Rec plan. It is, I think, 90% complete, if not more. Yeah. So we need a motion to,
Do your honor.
I move to reaffirm the adoption of the 2022 to 2027 Parks and Recreation Master Plan and authorize the city clerk to sign the resolution as presented by the Parks and Recreation Director.
Support.
moved by Polika and supported by Councilwoman Leaks May. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem James?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. Not on the agenda, but should be, and I'm remiss to adding it not to the beginning, but we need a call to audience section for public comment. So I'm now going to open the meeting for call to audience for public comment. If there's anybody in the audience who would like to speak, and or on Zoom, our team here will accept.
There's no hand raisers.
Yes. The audit usually doesn't
Pulling the whole crowd.
pull in a whole crowd, so with that, there's no one in the audience. Yes, sorry to our auditors. Seeing no public comment, I'm going to close public comment, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
No call to council. Just kidding.
I do wanna
Recording
remind
stopped.
everybody, tomorrow is the last day for the task force
Oh, wow. Okay.
Are you
applications.
getting more people in?
We have, but if you have friends that you want to apply, you need to get them applied by tomorrow.
Did you get Chris Best's application?